I like to think that stories are inherently idealistic, that the pursuit of delivering a good narrative and a strong theme can lead writers to create worlds and characters that might seem plot perfect. This isn't a bad thing. Stories can earn our trust and we allow them to captivate us. Others have themes that are meant to be strong and foundational, meant to be simple and digestible by anyone, no matter their background. All in all, stories are meant to inspire, to teach, and to be plain satisfying. So I think we've gotten used to being given easy, convenient answers. But sometimes there are those who realize the beauty in fragmentation. Sometimes stories can give us something broken and incomplete, and only in being imperfect do we realize what makes them so compelling. And it's in disconcerting us that we truly begin to engage with a story meaningfully. And that's why I want to talk about Takopi's original sin. The best way to summarize Takopi for me is by imagining a mixture of Fairly Odd Parents, E.T., and Oyasumi Punpun. That didn't help? Shen, that was the best I had. The point is, Takopi is only 6 episodes long, easily bingeable, and not really worth merely summarizing here. So instead of that, please do go watch it and come back when you're done. Alright? Y'all set? Good. I know that I joked about it earlier, but Takopi really does derive quite a bit of inspiration from children's media. Stories of down on their luck kids finding an alien best friend to whisk away their problems or help them in their day-to-day is not a new concept. But it's in Takopi's depiction where it really stands out. Not in that it's extremely graphic, though it very much is, but in that there is a truly suffocating helplessness that Takopi exudes. In these stories, and Takopi itself, the alien is a figure representing childhood, returning it to those who never got to appreciate it. And in these stories, they're accepted, adored, and used as a way to connect with one's inner self or serve as a guide to growing up. In Takopi, the poor bastard's rejected at every single turn. Every one of his gadgets, his acts of affection, and attempts at understanding the world are all met with cynicism, tragedy, and the general weight of a reality where children aren't allowed to be, well, children. The world constantly distorts his starry-eyed view, and there's this bombardment of misery that makes you wonder if the story is simply trying to make you depressed. But I don't think it is. Because otherwise, why showcase so many sides to our cast? Why remind us constantly that behind all of the malice and hatred, there are scared, helpless humans? I think a lot of people stuck on to the sensationalism of Takopi's visuals and narrative moments, citing it as dark and depressing, but never elaborating on what it does with such a tone. For me, I think Takopi envelops itself in this haze of despair as a sort of challenge to childhood innocence. Every time Takopi or one of the characters is beat down, it's the story asking whether or not they can get back up again and continue living. And, well, most stories I think would have them get back up. It would have them rely on their alien friend and find a way to escape their situation. It would allow them to see their dog again, allow them to eat the food they want, and allow them to have their family back. Other stories would have the moral be clean and simple, communicate that the events of the narrative were necessary and that the child had agency in crafting their own path forward. But not Takopi. Because Takopi realizes that its stories, dark as they are, resemble the lives of many real children. That sometimes horrible things happen to people who are, not by right nor law, but by moral principle, deserving of only love and freedom. There is no agency. Futility isn't a punishment but an inevitable outcome. Instead of leveraging trauma as a springboard for character growth or redemption, it acknowledges it as what it truly is: evil, cruel, unjust, and unnecessary. It's why Takopi continues to fail no matter what. Why at the very end, time travel be damned, he has no answer to tell Shizuka or a proper way to solve all of their problems. Because at the end of the day, what answer could a child really have? What point is there in asking a child how they'd fix their parents' divorce? How they would come to terms with their mother's nervous breakdowns, with their crippling sense of inadequacy? A standout review I read was one that was confused on whether or not the story was meant to be excessively depressing or absurdly humorous. And I thought, why not both? Demanding children to understand and pay for the failures of the world, failures they can't even begin to comprehend and thus are powerless to change, is hilariously grim. No? The tragedy and moral of the story lies within Takopi's inability to understand the world, not just because he's an alien, but because he's a proxy for childhood innocence. We're not meant to lament his ignorance, but the fact that said ignorance is being challenged so strongly with so little empathy. The moral, uniquely enough, is that they shouldn't be the ones answering these questions. And that's okay. That while their circumstances are terrible, they shouldn't be burdened with the responsibility of answering them, of believing that they were at fault or that they could have done better, of thinking that they were never good enough or that they could only ever be the type of evil that their parents were. Sometimes the answer isn't just unclear, sometimes it simply doesn't or shouldn't exist. Sometimes we will have to live broken, scarred, and changed irreparably. But that it doesn't mean we have to feel responsible. Because they're kids. Abuse is an injustice enough, and asking more from them is beyond cruel. And that's why, imperfect as it is, the ending of Takopi is poignant. Not everything is fixed. Hell, a lot of it is still broken. But at the very least, our characters grew up allowed to play video games. Allowed to joke about funny doodles and stories of their family pets or weird ball pens. At the very least, some level of childhood innocence was saved. Even if part of it had to be sacrificed. I think some stories center themselves on that sacrifice. That it's all part of growing up, and that to lose the stars in our eyes is nothing more than a consequence of life. And I think many will see Takopi similarly. But I believe the opposite. I think it's a celebration of innocence and a cautionary tale for what happens when it's taken too quickly from us. I think it wants to teach us the value of what we so easily take for granted, of what is so unfairly taken from the children of the story. I know that to a lot of people, it will seem overly gratuitous, maybe even exploitative. But I believe that it's in being so uncompromising that it fully and honestly conveys the weight of its message. That it's only by being so dark that we're reminded of how bright the characters could be. How happy they should be. And to me, a story that can condemn hopelessness instead of forcing a redemption out of it is certainly not exploitative. But it sure is tragic. And so we ought to learn from it. Because one day, we'll all have to grow up. We'll all have to lose that cute little octopus in our heads that tells us to live freely without a care. But that never justifies it being stolen from us. And that sometimes there is no perfect answer. Because the world, cruel and indifferent as it already is, doesn't deserve one from those who are owed nothing but love. Because if stories are allowed to be idealistic, well, why shouldn't kids be too? Hey there everyone, apologies for the short video this time, but we're on a bit of a busy streak and just wanted to get some content out there for you guys. Also the mic, because I'm using a phone. Takopi is one of those stories that is relatively simple, story-wise, due to its short and straightforward nature, but since it's also super sharply written, there's a lot of subtext to unfurl. As such, this is just a snippet of my thoughts on the series, and while I don't believe it's a masterpiece, I think it's great, and worth watching for those who can stomach it. Anyway, same as always, I implore you to form your own opinions and find your own answers as to how you feel about the series. After all, as it's taught us, being able to do so is quite a privilege. So, take care, and remind yourself to do some inner child work here and there, okay? Bye-bye!